So I don't know if y'all noticed the doors of the church. They look really good. Y'all notice the front doors out there and the side door right there? They look really nice. That's been needing to be done for a long time. Yeah, it's been needing to be done for a long time. Yeah, someone fixed them. Is that you, Brother Parks? No, no, Brother Rick probably. So yeah, that looks really really nice. So appreciate them taking care of that, and so hope everyone had a good week this week, and we are back in Second Kings chapter number 6. Second Kings chapter number yet. All right, Brother Bobby's got some tests coming up this week. We need to pray for Brother Bobby, and pray for him. Second Kings chapter number 6, verse number 24. Verse number 24, it says and in this passage right here, when you read verse 24 through 33, it almost looks like it should be the start of chapter number 7. Is because this passage right here goes right into chapter number 7. And so, but that's how they divided it out. And so we're going to read 6, and then we're going to read into 7. I don't know that we're going to read all the way down through 7, but we are going to read some because, like I said, it's the same story. And so in verse number 24, it says, "It came to pass after this that Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, gathered all his host and went up and besieged Samaria. And there was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, they besieged it until an ass's head was sold for 80 pieces of silver, and the fourth part of a cab of dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. And as the king of Israel was passing by upon the wall, there cried a woman unto him, saying, Help, my lord, O king. And he said, If the Lord do not help thee, whence shall I help thee? Out of the barn floor, or out of the winepress? And the king said unto her, What aileth thee? And she answered, This woman said unto me, Give thy son, that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow. So we boiled my son, and did eat him. And I said unto her on the next day, Give thy son, that we may eat him. And she hath hid her son. And it came to pass, when the king heard the words of the woman, that he rent his clothes, and he passed by upon the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth within upon his flesh. Then he said, God do so, and more also to me, if the head of Elisha the son of Shaphat shall stand on him this day. But Elisha sat in his house, and the elders sat with him, and the king sent a man from before him. But ere the messenger came to him, he said to the elders, See ye how this son of a murderer has sent to take away mine head? Look, when the messenger cometh, shut the door, and hold him fast at the door. Is not the sound of his master's feet behind him? And while he yet talked with them, behold, the messenger came down unto him, and he said, Behold, this evil is of the Lord. What should I wait for the Lord any longer? And again, like I said before, that's a question, and so here you get the answer from Elisha starting in chapter number 7. Then Elisha said, Hear ye the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, Tomorrow about this time shall a measure of fine flour be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel in the gate of Samaria. Then a Lord on whose hand the king leaned answered and the man of God and said, Behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might this thing be? And he said, Behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but shalt not eat thereof. Now I'm going to stop reading right there, and we may or may not get that far along, but I'm going to stop reading right there just for sake of time. And so again, in chapter number 6, verse number 24 here, we have the start of a new paragraph here, where here is Ben-Hadad, and Ben-Hadad again, what we studied last week was Ben-Hadad had went to get Elisha last week. He had went to get Elisha, and we talked about how that Elisha was telling the king of Israel, hey, don't go here because Ben-Hadad is set up a trap for you here. And so then Ben-Hadad decided, hey, I'm going to send my people down, and we're going to get Elisha. I need to talk to this guy. And so Elisha knew that they were coming, and his servant come out, and his servant looked up and saw all the army of Syria encamped around about him. And Elisha said, hey, they that are with us are more than with you. And they looked out, and he saw the chariots and the horses. And so we have how that Elisha told him, hey, it's not, I'll take you to the place, and I'll show you the guy. And he led him down there blind down to Samaria, to the king. And the king wanted to smite him, and he said, no, you're not going to smite him. No, feed them and send them home. So he feeds them and he sends them home. And then we get to this passage right here. It says, it came to pass after this that Ben-Hadad the king of Syria gathered all his host. So you think about this. The last time whenever he sent to get Elisha, it wasn't all his host. But this time he's serious, Brother Tyrone. This time he's serious. He's like, you know what? I'm going to fix this king of Israel. I'm going to fix Jehoram good this time. And so he sends all his hosts down to Samaria. And Chris, it's funny because there are many ways to fight a battle. I mean, you think about it. I mean, a lot of times you think there's just one way to fight a battle. That's with some kind of arms or something like that. But there's a lot of ways to fight a battle. I mean, you can fight a battle financially, where you just take their ability to make money away, and eventually they're going to run out of money. In this way right here, he took their ability to get any food away. By bringing all his hosts in, he apparently encamped the city around again, and he cut off all the channels to get food in and out. And so they didn't have enough stored up. They didn't have enough stored up in the barn floor and the wine press. They didn't have enough stored up in the city. And once those channels were cut off, and you think about how easy that is. You think about how easy that is even today. I mean, for those of us 1 year ago, 1 year ago, what are we? We're April what? April the 11th. April the 11th. And so you think about 1 year ago today, you were probably hearing someone saying that there was going to be a toilet paper shortage. And you're like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in all my life. I mean, all the factories are still working. They're still cutting trees down. All the factories still working. It's not going to happen. And brother, and I know it's ridiculous that it's a toilet paper shortage, but it's a prime example of what we all experienced. And Brother Croft, I remember I was in Tennessee, and I was making fun of people for making a run on toilet paper. I was making fun of them, Brother Parks, and I was up in Tennessee, up around Maryville. And I had to go somewhere, and so I came back through Etowah. And so I stopped in Etowah, and Chris, I went to the dollar store. And when I went to the dollar store right there in Etowah, there were people with toilet paper under each arm. And I went back there and I looked, and there was all kinds of toilet paper, and I'm like, I'm not even going to buy it. I am not going to be one of those people. I'm not, because those people, to me, they're part of the problem. Same way with the ammunition shortage we got going on right now. They're part of the problem. As soon as someone says, hey, there's going to be a shortage, if you go out and run and buy 14 of them, then when you normally would only buy one or two, you're part of the problem. And so I'm like, I'm not even going to buy any. And we're going shopping. We get, it's Friday. We're going shopping tomorrow. There'll be plenty. Brother Croft, we went to town, and honestly, we went all over town. We went to Kroger. We went to Walmart, and the shelves were bare. I finally ended up over at the Dollar General store by the Food City, and I had to buy Dollar General store, Dollar General brand toilet paper, because that's all that was left in the country. And I'm like, this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. But I'm like, if it's that simple to let us run out of toilet paper, Chris, what happens if they shut down your food supply? What happens if they, you got to think everything comes from somewhere. What happens, they shut down the the Suez Canal the other day, and they talked about what kind of disaster, how much of the world's economy goes through that one little channel right there. Just how much of the world's economy and all them giant ships go through that one little channel. And backed up, it took almost a week after they got it unclogged. It took almost a week to get all the ships that had been backed up through there. Because it's one lane road. You're only going through one at a time. And so you think about, I mean, that is a part of warfare. That is a part of warfare, because guess what? If you're not eating, you're not worried about fighting. If you're not eating, you're not worried about fighting. You're worried about, finding something to eat. And so Ben-Hadad brings all his host. He brings all his host, and he's out there, and they're not willing to come out. They're not willing to come out and fight, or they've tried to come out and fight, and they weren't able to break through because he brought all his host, and he's got him in there, and he's got him trapped. And it gets worse and worse and worse, and every day it gets a little worse. And you know how it is. Again, like I said, I mean, last year we're here, it's like 2 weeks flatten the curve, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Well, guess what? I mean, it's been over a year in some places, I mean, Georgia's been pretty much open, but there are a lot of places that still haven't opened up fully. I mean, the Supreme Court just made a ruling about California and having in-home church. That's not even having church at church. They made a ruling about that California couldn't restrict people from having church in their home. A year later, after a vaccine. And the governor of California is still trying to keep them locked down. And so you understand, I mean, I didn't intend for this to turn out to lockdowns are not good, but I mean, that's kind of where we're at right here. I mean, these lockdowns are a disaster. And so you have the king of Israel, and he's in a lockdown created by the king of Samaria. The king of Syria, Samaria. So you have here in Samaria, now you have in verse number 25, it says, and behold, they besieged it until an ass's head was sold for 80 pieces of silver, and the fourth part of a cab of dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. Now, I'm just telling you, I don't know exactly what that second part is right there, but whatever it is, it doesn't sound like I'd want to eat it, Brother Parks. You know what I mean? A fourth part of a cab, which a cab's a dry measure, but a fourth part of it is not very much, and they're selling it for 5 pieces of silver, not a shekel, which is what food had been selling for, but now we're talking about a whole piece of silver, and we're talking about 5 pieces. And so you have here where once the supply goes down, the price goes up. I mean, it's just how it is. Has anyone went to try and buy a box of 9mm shells lately? Has anyone, if you can even find them? I mean, the only gun that if you had, you're good right now. If you have 28 gauge shotgun, you're good, because you can find 28 gauge shells everywhere. Everywhere you go, there's 28 gauge shells. It's the only box of shells they got on the thing, Brother Parks. And so, but anywhere else you go, I mean, I paid, me and the boys, we went over to South Carolina, and we were going to do some hunting, and the boys left without bringing any shells, Brother Croft. And they called me and they said, hey, can you pick up shelves? I'm like, sure, no problem. I'm already in Augusta. Y'all are just leaving. I'll just run by Cabela's. Guy's like, no, not happening. So then he said, well, you might be able to go over to another place. I'm not going to mention it online just in case they still got a few. But anyway, so I go over to that other place, and they did have a few. But the problem was I paid about 4 times what I would have paid for it regular. But, the boys wanted to do some hunting, and I could not let them do it. So I was like, well, I went ahead and paid the price, but I didn't buy nowhere near as many shells as I thought I was going to buy. Once I saw the price, I'm like, I'm paying $17 a box for a box of shotgun shells. For shotgun shells. And you go anywhere, you go to those stores, and it's like, if they do have anything, they're handing out rationing cards. You can have 2. Here's your number. here's your number, and if you're lucky enough, because there's only so many of them to get a number, you get 2 boxes. That's it. And so you understand, I mean, because of that, the price has shot up. And it's kind of supposed to try and balance things out. If the price shoots up, the demand generally goes down. But it hasn't gone down. And every time Brother Cross President speaks, the demand just goes up that much more on ammunition. And so, but you have here the king of Israel, and he's stuck, Brother Parks. He's stuck inside this city. He's got this army, and he's stuck inside this city, and it appears he doesn't know what to do. The shame of it is that I feel like he should have known what to do. I feel like he should have known what to do, Chris. Because again, I mean, we've had story after story of not Elisha and another king, but Elisha and this king. I mean, here he has Elisha, and he never would humble himself and just walk up to Elisha and say, look, we're in a mess. We're in a mess. And maybe I do know why we're in a mess. Maybe I don't know. But can you tell me why we're in a mess? I mean, the fact that you could tell me that the king of Syria was going to be hiding in a certain place, and that for me not to go down there because he was going to attack us, the fact that you could tell us that and it be accurate 100% of the time, surely to goodness you could tell me what to do in this situation. Brother Croft, that's not what he does. That's not what he does. And it says the king of Israel was passing upon the wall. So here he is, he's walking out upon the wall, and again, he's the king. At least he was present. At least he wasn't hiding from the people and sitting there eating cake and bonbons while the people were starving. I mean, at least he was out there. I'll give him, you want to give people credit whenever they do something they should be doing. At least he was out there, Brother Parks. At least he was out there looking. He wasn't isolated and be like, well, everything's fine here in the palace. I don't know why people are complaining out there. It's fine here in the palace. He was at least out and about, Chris. And he was out and he was walking upon a wall, and he was not prepared. He was not prepared, and I don't see how you could ever prepare yourself for what was about to happen to him. I don't see how you could ever prepare yourself. But it says, as he was passing by upon the wall, there cried a woman unto him, saying, help my Lord, O king. And so again, listen to what he says next. And he said, if the Lord do not help thee, when shall I help thee? You ever notice that some people are so close? They're so close, Brother Parks. But they're so far away. They're so close. I mean, he's right. If God doesn't help you, what am I going to do? If God doesn't help you, what am I going to do? I mean, you think about, and we all know the verse, and I'm going to read it. In 2 Chronicles chapter number 7, again, we know the verse. I'm going to read the one before it. 2 Chronicles chapter number 7, here's God talking to Solomon, and he says in verse 13, if I shut up heaven, that there be no rain, or if I command the locusts to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves, and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. And so again, I mean, that verse, even though it's later in the Bible, was written previous to. That promise was given to Solomon. That promise was given to Solomon. And so because the kingdom was split after Solomon, and now we have Jehoram as the king of Israel, that promise was still made. That promise was still made. And so you have Jehoram, and he's very close, Chris. How many people have become very close to salvation, but they just leave one thing out? They realize that they're a sinner. They realize that they're a sinner. They realize that they need help. And they want to be saved. But there's something that's keeping them from coming. And you've heard people say it. You've heard people say it. If I get saved, will I have to quit doing this? And in my opinion, the answer then becomes yes. Because you've made it an issue. Had you never said it, the answer's not necessarily. I mean, you're repenting. You are repenting. You're going to want to quit all of that stuff. But if that is the issue, if that's the stopping point, then the answer is yes. Then the answer is yes. And so here you have the king of Israel again, Chris, and he's very close. He says multiple statements in this passage, but he never comes to the right conclusion, Brother Parks. Eventually, we're going to get down to it. Eventually, the conclusion he comes to is, I'm going to take Elisha's head off. Excuse me? How is it that you went? How is it that you... why? But how many times have you seen people? And you're like, yes, yeah. What? How did you come to that conclusion? You got this right, and you got this right, and this right, and then you just threw me a curveball. When you're teaching your children, and you're teaching them something, and you're like, all right, explain to me what you're looking at. Even if I'm at work, if I'm working, I got someone troubleshooting, I'm like, all right, explain to me, because if you can explain it, you understand it. If you can't explain it, you don't understand it. Explain to me what your reasoning was behind that. And you're like, boom, boom, boom. All right, I'm following you, but I don't understand how you ended up over here. And so here's the king of Israel. Here's the king of Israel, and he's right. He says, if the Lord do not help thee, when shall I help thee? There's nothing in the barn floor. There's nothing in the wine press. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. You can come, you can talk to me, but if there was food in there, we would have already had it out. If there was something in there, we would have already had it out. I cannot help you. So he said in verse 28, and the king said unto her, what aileth thee? Again, like I said, he was not prepared. He was not prepared for the answer. What aileth thee? And she answered, this woman said unto me, give thy son that we may eat him. I mean, can you imagine how desperate, how hungry you have to be? Again, we live in a society where the grocery stores are always full. We just experienced a little bit of it last year of shortages, but none of us went hungry. None of us went hungry because of it. We may not have got to eat our favorite package of peanut M&Ms because the store was out of them. But Costco may have told us we could only buy one 10-pound bag of chicken instead of 4. Have 40 pounds of chicken in the freezer instead of just 10. But you understand, we haven't been hungry, Brother Croft. And I don't ever want to get to that place. This woman got to the place where her and another woman sat down and said, basically, what the woman in Elijah's day said, hey, me and my son, we're about to eat, we're about to have our last meal, and then we're going to die. That was the place these women were at, and and they said, I got an idea. I tell you what. And again, she's like, hey, today, you boil your son today. We'll eat your son today, and tomorrow we'll eat mine. Just me, I'm going to be like, no, we're going to start with yours first. I mean, even if you're all the way down to that place, be like, now we're starting with yours first. You understand? But she's like, hey, she said, boil my son, and I couldn't think of anything else to do. I couldn't think of anything else to do, and so that's what we did. And so we boiled my son, and we ate my son. And again, we don't look at it that way. I'm sure that we read stories about lands where they have cannibals, but we don't think about that. We don't think about that. And so she's like, hey, we boiled my son. We ate my son. The next day I came and I saw the woman, and I'm like, all right, it's your turn. And she hit her son. She hit her son. She's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. No matter how hungry I am, I can eat your son, but I couldn't eat mine. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible to even think about. It's terrible to even think about that's how far down they were, Brother Parks. I mean, all the while, here has been Hadad and the king of Syria and all his host sitting out there, and they're enjoying the fruit of the land. They're not having a problem in the world. They're not having a problem in the world. And here is this king, and his kingdom is crumbling around him. And now this woman comes to him, and look at what happens in verse number 30. And I never caught this before. And it came to pass when the king heard the words of the woman that he rent his clothes, and he passed by upon the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth within upon his flesh. Now, Brother Parks, I never caught this, and I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. It almost appears to me, Brother Tyrone, that the king of Israel had his sackcloth on underneath his royal clothes. It says that he heard the words of the woman, he rent his clothes, he passed by upon the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth within upon his flesh. So here he is, he's still up on the wall. The woman talked to him. He rents his clothes. When he rents his clothes, he had his sackcloth on underneath. And I got to thinking about how many people do we pass by, Brother Parks, that have their sackcloth on underneath, and we never even know it? How many people do you meet and talk to, and they've got their royal apparel on the outside? He was the king. You meet them, you talk to them, and Chris, you have no idea that inside, underneath, they're wearing sackcloth. Inside, underneath, they're so crushed that they've got their sackcloth on, but they're too ashamed to just let you see, here's where I'm really at. It took that story, Miss Jimmy, it took that story for that king to get to the place where he could let his kingdom see, I'm just as crushed as you are. I am just as destroyed as you are. I'm supposed to be the king. I'm supposed to have the answers. I don't have the answers. And I'm just as destroyed as you are. It took that story of a woman saying, we ate my own child. And how many people, Brother Parks, do we look at, and they're in their Sunday best? They come in Sunday morning. They look sharp. They look great. And they're in sackcloth on the inside. How many people do you walk up to at work and you talk to them and they're in their same work uniform and everything looks normal? and they're in sackcloth. It's something to think about. It's something to think about that you just don't know, Chris. You just don't know. I mean, again, no one had any idea when this woman came to the king. She came to him because she thought he could help. She didn't have any idea that he was in just as bad a shape as she was. He was in just as bad a shape as she was. He hadn't had anything to eat either. They went from the previous few verses, again, when Elisha said feed them, that he didn't just give them bread and water like Elisha said, but he put out a great provision. They went from great provision to nothing. Money means nothing. Money meant nothing to them then. I mean, 4 score, is 4 score, is that not, is score 20? Is 4 score and 7 years ago? Oh, sorry. So yeah, so that would be, the score is 20, so 4 score is 80. That's right. 80 pieces of silver for a donkey's head. Not a lot of meat in a donkey's head, Brother Croft. Not a lot of meat in a donkey's head. You're going to be eating a lot of stuff you don't want to eat. It's going to be soup is what you're eating. Money means nothing. At this point to the king, money meant nothing. And he said right. He said, if the Lord don't help. And Brother Parks, this is what's so sad to me. You have these people that are walking around in sackcloth. You have these people walking around in sackcloth. And the answer is right in front of them. I read it a second ago. If you'll humble yourselves and pray and turn from your wicked ways and seek my face. But Justin, they get to that point and they're like, look what he does. In verse 31, he says, then he said, God do so and more also to me if the head of Elisha the son of Shaphat shall stand on him this day. What in the world? How did he come to that conclusion, Brother Parks? How is it that he got all the way down? I mean, you got to think. He said, if the Lord, he said, he's in sackcloth. He's in sackcloth, so he's humble. He's all the way there. And all he's got to say is, I need a man of God. I need that man of God to come and show me what we've done wrong. Whatever we've done, I mean, there was nothing left to do but that one thing, Brother Tyrone. And you get these people, they get all the way down and they're in sackcloth, and the one thing they won't do is call on God. The one thing they won't do is call on Jesus. They'll boom, squirt out. They go look for it in a bottle. They go look for it in a pill. They go look for it in the world, just period, the world. They go look for it in all these other places. And they were so close. This king was so close. And he missed it. He missed his chance, Brother Parks. He missed his chance. And he said again, he said, God do so more also to me. He's like, hey, he said, we'll boil my son. We'll boil my son if the head of Elisha stands on him by the end of this day. It's a shame. Again, we're going to see it in just a second. It's a shame when you have people around you that are supposed to be your friends. Why was there not someone? I mean, you got to think back in the previous chapter with Naaman. You got to think you had a little maid of Israel that got captured, and here's Naaman, and she's like, "Would to God, it would be so nice if you were in Israel where there was this prophet." How is it in Israel in Israel with a man who has had a relationship with Elisha that someone in his group couldn't have said. I mean, you think previous what we've been studying, that whenever they said, hey, when the king of Syria is like, which of us is for the king of Israel, that someone from the Syrians said, well, it's not us for the king of Israel. It's Elisha the prophet that's in Israel that's telling you what you say, telling the king of Israel what you're saying in your bedchamber. You would think surely that someone in Israel would have said to the king, hey, don't you think it's about time to go talk to Elisha? Don't you think we should just go sit down and just talk to Elisha? They knew right where he was. They knew right where he was. But Brother Parks, they were so close. You have people that you see, they come to church and they need help. And they know they need help. But just coming to church is not the help you need. Until you get to the Savior, until you get to Jesus Christ and give him everything, that's the help you need. You can sit in church and sit in church and sit in church and hear the word and be moved and be wooed. But until you come to the place where you accept Christ, you're just like this king. You're so close. You're so close. But at any moment, you could make the wrong decision. Any moment, you can decide, I know how to solve this problem. I'm going to take the head of Elisha off his head. That'll fix everything. What did he even think that was going to fix? What did he even think that was going to fix? It wasn't going to fix anything. It wasn't going to, they weren't going to get any more food. Were they going to eat Elisha? You're going to feed an entire city with one man? I don't think so. I don't think so. But that was the conclusion he came to. And so in verse number 32, it says, but Elisha sat in his house. Elisha was where you expected him to be. He was where you expected him to be. Elisha's in his house. And no doubt, had they came to him, he could have told them, hey, it seems like any time that God used another nation to punish Israel, it was because they were committing or had committed some kind of sin. That's it. God was not sitting there saying, I'm just going to punish them to punish them. No, that's not what it was. They were committing or had committed some type of sin. And God was trying to draw them back to him by punishing them. That's it. And so Elisha could have said, here's where you're off the mark. Repent. Seek God's face. Again, repent, turn from your ways. And God will heal your land. But no, that's not what he does. He says, and so here's Elisha sitting in his house, and the elders sat with him, and so he's sitting there, and again, just like before, just like when the king of Syria sends someone, Elisha knows they're coming. Elisha knows they're coming, and here comes the messenger, and he says in verse number 32, see ye how this son of a murderer has sent to take away my head. Unfortunately, what happened? The king of Israel reverted to what was in his human nature. He said he's the son of a murderer, and now he wants to be a murderer. He just reverted to what was in his human nature. He was so close to getting the answer for all of life. But instead, he reverted to what was in his human nature. How many people are walking around in sackcloth today, and they're right on the verge, but they would rather revert to what's in their human nature? Their dad was a drunk, their mom was a drunk, their grandpa was a drunk, and they run off and become a drunk. They run off and become whatever, just using drunk because it's easy. But you understand, they revert to a human nature that as a child growing up, they said to themselves, I never want to be that way. I never want that to be me. I never want my kids to have to experience in their childhood what I experienced in my childhood. And that's what they run and do, because it's in their human nature. He said, you see how this son of a murderer has sent to take away my head. And he tells him, he said, look, he said, when he shows up, as soon as he shows up, grab him, stick him against the door, because he's not by himself. The king's behind him. The king's behind him. And while he yet talked then, behold, the messenger came down unto him and said, behold, this evil is of the Lord. Okay. All right. But it's not because of the Lord. It's because of their sin. Had he just came with a humble and repentant heart, had that messenger showed up and said, hey, this evil is because of our sin, and we acknowledge our sin, what can you do? Can you talk to God for us? But no, this evil's of the Lord. The Lord did this. And you are his messenger. You are his prophet. You are his mouthpiece. And so if we punish you, what? Again, it's terrible logic. It's not even logical. How does a person go from saying, if the Lord don't help you, if the Lord doesn't help you, what can I do? To now to the place, well, if I kill the man of God, that'll break this curse. Part of it, no doubt, is because they were idolaters. And they were calf worshipers. They couldn't break themselves of it. They might break themselves temporarily from serving Baal, but they were calf worshipers. Their calf wasn't doing them any good. And the one thing that could do them good was the one thing that they blamed. And so in chapter 7, verse number 1, then Elisha said, the end of that, he said, behold, this evil is of the Lord. What should I wait for the Lord any longer? I've expected God to make a change. I've expected God to make this better. And he hasn't made it better. Have you done what you were supposed to do for God to make it better? Again, I read it. Have you done what you're supposed to do? It's good, and again, it's a figurative sense. It's good for us. It's good for God to see that you're in sackcloth. But if you don't make the extra move towards God, what good is it for you to walk around in sackcloth? And so they're like, we've waited for the Lord to answer, and he hasn't answered. Well, yeah, he hasn't, because you left out a part. You left out something. And again, like I said, you have people, they come to church, and they feel like that should fix the problem. You see families that they start having marital problems, and so they'll come and they'll sit in church for a little bit. And as soon as their marriage starts to heal a little bit, right back out in the world. They didn't get the cure, brother. They did not get the cure. They got a little bit of relief. The symptoms started to die down, so they're like, whew, It sure is hard. It sure is hard to get up and go to church on Sunday morning. It sure is hard to get up and go to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. Goodness gracious, them people are dedicated. You get up and go to work 5, 6, 7 days a week. 8 hours a day, 9, 10, 11 hours a day. You can get up and do that. Well, I work so much, I really just, I can't, I got to get that extra hour and a half sleep. Do you really? Do you really? They're like, we've waited. What, should I wait for the Lord any longer? Should I wait any longer? Why? I can't wait any longer. I got people boiling and eating their own children. And you're the problem. And so in chapter 7, verse number 1, then Elisha said, hear ye the word of the Lord, thus saith the Lord, tomorrow. Again, it was nothing for Elijah. It was not a thing. I mean, he said tomorrow. Brother Parks, do you not think that 2 weeks before this conversation happened, it would have been just as easy for Elisha to say tomorrow? It would have been just as easy. He didn't do anything except say tomorrow. And so we're going to get to it next week. We're going to get to it next week. What did they do? What did Israel do to solve this problem? Not a thing. Not a thing. God did it for them. And God used as unusual as circumstances as you can think about. He used those chariots. He used those chariots that we talked about last week. He used those chariots for them to hear. And they took off, and a bunch of lepers sitting outside the wall saying, what's the point of sitting here? If we go in the city, they ain't got no food in there, they're going to die. If we go down the Syrians and they kill us, we're going to die. We're just going to die. We're going to die anyway. Why sit here and die? Let's just go see, maybe. God had the answer all along, Brother Croft. He had the answer. He had the solution, and it was a rapid solution, Brother Parks. It wasn't a 12-step program, and 4 years from now you're going to be cured. The answer was right there. The cure was a rapid cure. But the cure was God's cure. And they wouldn't come to him. They said they did. Why are we going to wait for him any longer? But they never came to him. And when they finally came to the prophet, they didn't come intending to get right with God. They intended to come and take the prophet's head off. And he's like, just stand right there, boys. I'm going to show you something. And then in verse number 2, then a Lord on whose hand the king leaned answered the man of God and said, behold. Again, like I said, here's the king, and the king has these counselors. Who are your counselors? I know people like to go to Miss Jimmy. They ought to. People like to go to my mother-in-law and talk to my mother-in-law. Wise counsel is a good thing. Good, godly counsel is a good thing. That's not who the king of Israel had. The king of Israel had this Yahoo. This Yahoo that's like, yeah, whatever. It's not going to happen. He's like, behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might this thing be? He said, you're crazy, Elisha. If God opened up the windows in heaven and dumped it down directly on Samaria, I'm still not convinced that what you're saying is true. You can be a doubter all you want to. You can be a doubter all you want to. But it doesn't get you anywhere. Until you with your whole heart believe that God can do it, he's not going to do it for you. You have to with your whole heart believe. And he said, behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but shalt not eat thereof. It's a sad statement. but it's a statement that turned out to be true. Thank you.